You want to know the thing nobody tells you about the day the whole galaxy decided to wipe us out? It was quiet. Not dramatic. Not loud. No alarms, no screaming, none of that. Just a man named Idris sitting in a cold room on a station called Teller Gate, drinking something that was supposed to taste like coffee and didn't, watching a screen that had gone completely dark. That man was me. And I'm going to tell you exactly how it happened because I was there. Not in some history book way. I mean, I was in the room. I heard the voices. I saw the faces. I watched the thing that scared every other species in the galaxy more than any weapon we ever built. So let me start at the beginning. The real beginning, not the part they put in the broadcasts. Teller Gate was a junction station. If you've never been to one, picture a city the size of a small moon, hanging in empty space, with thousands of ships passing through it every single day. Traders, diplomats, refugees, smugglers, tourists who'd saved up their whole lives just to see the thing humans built on the edge of nowhere. Because that's what it was. We built it. Humanity. The newest species in the Concord, that's what they called the Big Galactic Council, the Concord of Free Peoples, which is a fancy name for everybody who isn't us. We'd been part of the Concord for about 40 years. 40 years is nothing out there. The Velsha had been members for 9,000. The Koran for 11,000. There were species in that council so old their homeworlds had been dead and reborn twice before humans figured out fire. And here we were, bobbies, newcomers, and we'd gone and built the busiest trade station in the entire outer arm. That made some people nervous. I worked the night cycle in operations. My job was boring on purpose. I watched the long-range arrays, logged ship arrivals, made sure nothing crashed into anything. Most nights the most exciting thing that happened was a fuel leak in a cargo bay or some drunk Tarn diplomat trying to fistfight a vending unit. I was good at boring. Boring meant everyone was safe. That night, and I'll never forget it, the coffee tasted worse than usual. The lights in Section 9 were flickering again, and my partner Sella was telling me about her kid's first words. Her kid was Velsha. They don't talk like we do, they sort of hum and click, but the meaning comes through clean. The kid had hummed something that translated to more while reaching for food, and Sella was over the moon about it. He's a genius, she said, obviously. Obviously, I agreed. That's the thing people forget when they tell this story. We weren't enemies with the other species. Half my friends weren't human. Sella and I had worked side by side for 6 years. I'd held her hand when her bond partner died. She'd helped me move apartments. She was family. So when I tell you the galaxy united against humanity, I want you to understand it didn't feel like that from the inside. Not at first. From the inside, it felt like a normal night with a friend talking about her kid. Then the long-range array went dark. Now arrays don't just go dark. They have triple redundancy. Backups on backups. If one fails, 2 more pick up the slack instantly. For all 3 to die at the same exact second, that's not a malfunction. That's somebody pulling a plug somewhere. I sat up straight, put the bad coffee down. Sella. Hello? Array's dead, all 3. She turned. I watched her face change. Velsha don't have eyebrows, but they have these ridges above their eyes, and when she's scared the ridges go flat. They went flat. Run a diagnostic, she said. I'm running it. The diagnostic came back in 2 seconds. That was wrong too. Diagnostics take longer than that. This one came back instantly with 1 line of text. External override, authority, Concord Central. I read it 3 times. I didn't understand it the first 2. The Concord had reached across light years and shut off our eyes, our station, our home. They'd switched off our ability to see the space around us like you'd flip off a light switch in a room you didn't want someone looking around. And the only reason you turn off someone's eyes is because you don't want them to see what's coming. I want to back up for a second and tell you about my hands. I have ordinary hands. Scarred up a little from a childhood on a farm colony, calluses from real work before I ever sat in front of a screen. Nothing special. Human hands. I bring it up because the Concord had a whole theory about our hands, about all of us, really. They had a name for it. They called it the human variable, and they said it in council meetings like a curse word. See, every other species in the Concord had evolved on a stable world. Predictable seasons, predictable predators, slow, steady planets where the worst thing that happened to you in 1,000,000 years was a mild ice age you had plenty of time to walk away from. Earth wasn't like that. Earth tried to kill us every single day for 4 billion years and never once succeeded. Ice ages, asteroid winters, supervolcanoes, plagues, droughts that lasted centuries. Our whole evolution was one long argument with a planet that wanted us dead. And we won. Not because we were stronger, we weren't. We won because we adapted faster than the thing trying to kill us. The Concord scientists had studied this. They'd written papers, and the conclusion they reached, the one that got passed around in private, terrified them. Humans, they decided, didn't have a ceiling. Every other species hit a limit, a point where their biology said this is as far as you go. Pain, fear, exhaustion, there was a wall and they couldn't push past it. Humans pushed past the wall. We did it for fun. We climbed mountains that would kill us, ran until our hearts nearly burst, dove into water cold enough to stop a Koran's blood, and then we wrote songs about it. The Concord looked at that, and they didn't see explorers. They saw a weapon that hadn't been pointed at anything yet. So there I am, staring at the words external override, and the station-wide comm crackles to life. Not the local channel, the big one, the one that reaches every single being on Teller Gate at once. The voice that came through was Koran. You can always tell. They speak in this deep, layered way, like three people talking in harmony because they actually have three vocal structures. It's beautiful normally. It wasn't beautiful that night. Attention occupants of the structure designated Teller Gate. The structure, not the station, not Teller Gate, just the structure, like it was already a ruin, like they were talking about something that used to exist. By unanimous vote of the Concord of Free Peoples, the human species is hereby declared a Tier 1 existential threat. All human assets are to be quarantined. All human personnel are to surrender to Concord authority. Resistance will be answered with sterilization. Sterilization. You know what that word means out there. It doesn't mean cleaning. It means turning a place into glass. It means making it so nothing ever lived there and nothing ever will. They had weapons that could do it to a planet, to a station. Easy. They wouldn't even need the big guns. The comm kept going. This decision was reached after the discovery of Project Lazarus. Humanity is found to be in violation of the Sanctity Accords. You have one cycle to comply. There will be no negotiation. There will be no appeal. Then it cut off, and the lights went out. Let me tell you about Project Lazarus, because that's the thing that started all of this, and almost nobody got the truth about it. Here's what the Concord thought it was: a secret human program to build weapons that could end species, genocide machines, a doomsday project hidden away in the dark, proof that humanity was exactly the monster they feared. Here's what it actually was. Project Lazarus was a medical program. That's it, that's the whole terrible secret. It was a hospital project. See, 40 years in the Concord and we'd noticed something. Other species died of things we could cure. The Velsha had a wasting sickness that killed 1/3 of their children before adulthood. We'd solved that kind of thing on Earth 200 years ago. The Koran had a genetic collapse that hit them in old age. We had the gene therapy sitting in a database, gathering dust. But the Concord had rules, the Sanctity Accords. You weren't allowed to alter the natural course of another species. It was supposed to protect against bioweapons and forced experimentation. Noble idea. But it also meant that if a Velsha kid was dying of something humans could fix in an afternoon, you had to stand there and watch them die. Legally, you had to watch. We couldn't do it. That's the part the conquered never understood about us. They wrote it off as arrogance, as humans thinking they knew best. It wasn't that. It was that we'd buried too many of our own. We knew what it felt like to watch a kid die when the medicine existed and the rules said no. We'd done that to ourselves for centuries before we got our act together, and we swore we'd never stand by and watch it happen to anyone again, human or not. So a group of human doctors started Project Lazarus. Quietly. They started curing things they weren't supposed to cure. Velsha kids who should have died were growing up. Koran elders who should have collapsed were dancing at their grandchildren's bonding ceremonies. And they kept it secret because they knew that if the conquered found out, they wouldn't see doctors saving lives. They'd see humans rewriting the biology of other species. They'd see a weapon. And they were right. Sela found my hand in the dark. The emergency lighting kicked in after a few seconds, dim red strips along the floor just enough to see by. Everything looked like blood and shadow. I could hear, somewhere far off, the sound of people starting to panic. Voices rising, something heavy being dragged. Idris, Sela said. Her voice was steady but her hand wasn't. What's Project Lazarus? And I realized, standing there in the red light, that she didn't know. She had no idea. Her kid, the genius kid who just said his first word, was that kid alive because of Project Lazarus? Was Sela's whole family one of the ones we'd quietly saved? I didn't know, and it didn't matter, because the conquered had just declared that everyone like me was a monster, and everyone like her was supposed to hand us over to be turned into glass. It's the reason they want us dead, I said, but it's not what they think it is. She looked at me for a long moment. Velsha eyes are big and dark, and they catch the light. I could see two little red emergency strips reflected in hers. I know it's not, she said. And just like that, I knew which side she was on. I knew it before she said another word. And I'm telling you, after the day I just had, after the whole galaxy turning into a fist aimed at my head, that one sentence from one friend was the thing that let me keep breathing. What do we do? She asked. We need to get to command, I said. We need to talk to the director, and we need to do it before they decide one cycle is too generous. The corridors of Teller Gate were chaos. Not riot chaos, not yet, but fear chaos, the kind where everyone is moving and nobody knows where they're going. I saw a family of Tarn merchants trying to push their whole inventory cart toward the docking bays like they could just leave, like there was anywhere to go. There wasn't. The conquered ships were already out there, somewhere past the dead arrays in the dark we couldn't see. I saw a Koran priest standing perfectly still in the middle of the flow, all three of his voices murmuring a prayer, eyes closed, completely calm, like a rock in a river. And I saw humans. Humans were doing something the other species weren't. I noticed it right away because it was strange. The non-humans were either panicking or freezing. But the humans, the dock workers, the engineers, the off-duty pilots, the cooks and cleaners and traders, the humans were organizing. I watched a woman I didn't know climb up onto a cargo crate and start directing traffic with her hands. Families and elderly to the inner ring. Anyone with engineering certs, follow the green line to command. Everyone else, find a kid who's lost their parents and stay with them. Nobody had told her to do that. There was no plan. The galaxy had just declared us a Tier 1 existential threat, and this random woman on a crate was already building order out of the panic because that's what we do. That's the human variable. We don't freeze. We don't wait for permission. When the world tries to kill us, we get to work. I saw 3 teenage boys carrying an elderly Velsha man between them, the man too weak to walk, the boys grunting and sweating and not stopping. Not their species. Didn't matter. I grabbed Sela's hand tighter, and we ran for the green line. Command was a wreck. The director was a woman named Adiz Okonkwo, and if you ever meet anyone who tells you they were as calm as her that night, they're lying. She was standing in the center of the command floor with about 30 people around her, all of them talking at once, and she was listening to every single one of them somehow, and answering them one at a time without ever raising her voice. Engineering, I need the arrays back. I don't care that they're overridden, find me a workaround. Medical, how many can the inner ring hold? Comms, are we even able to transmit anymore, or did they take that too? I pushed forward. Director, Idris Night Ops. The override came from Concord Central directly. It's not a station hack, it's a command-level lockout. She looked at me with eyes that had already seen the bottom of this situation and were just confirming the details. I know. They want us blind so we can't see the fleet coming. How long until they're in weapons range, can you tell? With the arrays dead, number could be a day, could be an hour. It's not an hour, said a new voice. Everyone turned. There was a man standing in the doorway I hadn't noticed come in. Older, gray at the temples. He wore a plain coat with no insignia, which on a military station means either nobody or somebody who doesn't need a label. He was somebody. My name is Dr. Hale, he said. I ran Project Lazarus. The room went silent. You could feel it shift, because here was the man, the reason, the thing the whole galaxy wanted to kill us over, standing in a doorway in a plain coat looking tired. You, somebody said, you're the reason there. Yes, Hale said, I am, and before you decide what you think about that, you should know what I did, and what I'm about to do. Okonkwo crossed her arms. Then talk fast, doctor, the galaxy's coming. So he talked. He told us about the kids, the Velsha wasting sickness, the Quarren genetic collapse, a dozen other things and diseases with long names that killed the children and the elders of species who'd been our neighbors for 40 years. He told us about the rule that said we had to watch them die. He told us how he and a team of doctors decided they wouldn't. We saved 9,000 lives, Hale said. That we know of, probably more. Children who are alive right now on 100 different worlds because we broke a rule we never should have had to follow. And the Conquered found out, Okonkwo said. The Conquered found out, he nodded slowly. And they didn't see 9,000 saved children. They saw 9,000 alterations, 9,000 examples of humans reaching into the biology of other species and changing it. To them, that's not medicine. That's the first move in a war they've been afraid of since the day we joined. So they're going to kill all of us, I said. My voice came out rougher than I meant it to. Everyone on this station, every human everywhere, over a hospital project. Hale looked at me, and there was something in his face, not guilt exactly, something heavier than guilt. They're going to try, he said. Here's the thing about that night that I keep coming back to. We could have surrendered. I want to be honest about that, because the version of this story that gets told later makes it sound like there was never any question, like every human just stood tall and brave from the first second. That's not true. We're not built like that. We're built scared. We feel fear deeper than any species in that Conquered, because fear is what kept us alive on a planet that wanted us dead. There were people in that command room, good people, who said we should comply. Hand over Hale. Hand over the project. Throw ourselves on the mercy of the Conquered and hope they only took the ones responsible. And you know what? That was a reasonable thing to say, maybe even the smart thing. Okonkwo let them say it. She didn't shut them down. She listened the same way she listened to everything, with her whole attention. Then she asked one question. If we hand them Dr. Hale, she said, do we believe they'll stop with Dr. Hale? Silence. Because we all knew the answer. The Conquered hadn't declared Dr. Hale a Tier 1 existential threat. They declared humanity one. The whole species. Lazarus wasn't the real reason, it was the excuse. The real reason was 4 billion years of a planet that couldn't kill us and a council of older species who'd done the math and didn't like the answer. They've been afraid of us since the day we walked into that council chamber, Okonkwo said. Lazarus just gave them a name for the fear. If we give them hail, they'll find another name next year, and another the year after, until there's nothing left of us to be afraid of. She looked around the room, at humans and Velsha and Corin and Tarn, at all of us. We're not handing anyone over, she said. Not Dr. Hale, not a single child, not one of us. Now, who's going to help me figure out how to survive the night? I'll tell you who. Everybody. Not just the humans. That's the part the conquered never planned for. That's the variable they didn't put in their equation. See, they thought when they declared us a threat, every other species would line up against us. Quarantine the humans, hand them over, save yourselves. And on paper, that's what the vote said, unanimous. The whole galaxy against humanity. But a vote in a council chamber, light years away, isn't the same as the being standing next to you. The Volsha mother whose kid is alive because of Lazarus. The Karan grandfather dancing at a ceremony he should never have lived to see. The Tarn merchant whose business partner of 20 years happens to be human. The conquered voted against humanity. The people on Tulla Gate voted against the conquered. Sulla was the first non-human to step forward in that command room. She walked right up next to Okonkwo and said, in front of everyone, "My son is 6 years old. He said his first word today. He's only alive because somebody human broke a rule to save him. So whatever you need, Director, I'm in." And then the Karan priest who'd been praying in the corridor, he'd followed us up. I hadn't even noticed. He stepped forward too. All three of his voices spoke at once, and they said, "The accords command me to surrender you. My faith commands me to protect the innocent. I have chosen which voice to obey." One by one they came forward. Not all of them, some left. Some went to the docking bays to try their luck. I don't blame them, fear is fear. But enough stayed. Enough of every species stayed that when I looked around that command room, I didn't see humans making a last stand. I saw the galaxy itself splitting in two, and the half that stood with us was standing in that room. The first ship arrived 4 hours later. We knew because the docking sensors, which still worked, even with the arrays dead, picked up a mass coming in fast. Real fast. Combat approach fast. Okonkwo had us patch the docking feed up onto the main display, and there it was. A conquered enforcement cruiser. I'd seen them before in parades and ceremonies. Sleek, beautiful things, all curves and light, built by species that had 1,000 years to make their weapons elegant. This one wasn't in a parade. It was sitting half a kilometer off our docking ring with its weapon ports open, and you didn't need the arrays to understand what that meant. The comm crackled, Karan Harmony voice again. "Tulla Gate, this is enforcement vessel solemn verdict. You have not complete. Surrender all human personnel immediately or we begin sterilization protocols." Okonkwo keyed the comm. Her voice didn't shake. "I will go to my grave not knowing how." "Solemn verdict, this is Director Okonkwo. There are 40,000 beings on this station. The majority are not human. You'll be killing your own people." A pause. Then the Karan voice again, and there was something in it, not cruelty. Sorrow, almost. "We are aware. The vote accounted for acceptable losses. Comply and the losses will be limited to the human population. Refuse and the losses will be total. The choice is yours, Director." And that's when I understood, all the way down to my bones, what we were up against. They weren't monsters. That would have been easier. Monsters you can hate clean. They were scared, just like us. So scared of what we might become that they were willing to kill 40,000 beings, their own children among them, to make sure we never got the chance. They'd done the math. They decided we were a threat worth any price to remove. The galaxy hadn't united against humanity out of evil. It had united against us out of fear. And there is nothing in the universe more dangerous than something that's afraid. Akanqua cut the comm, turned to the room. Ideas, she said, now fast. And here's where the engineers earned their place in the story. There was a man, Ruz, his name was, head of station engineering, hadn't slept in 2 days and looked it, and he'd been quiet that whole time, hunched over a console, ignoring everyone. He suddenly stood up so fast his chair flew backward. The arrays, he said. They overrode the arrays, command-level lockout. We can't turn them back on. We know, somebody said. What's your point? My point, Ruz said, and he was grinning now, this exhausted, manic grin, is that they locked them in the off position, from the outside, which means the lockout is running on their authority, through their command channel, which means... He was talking faster now, half to himself, which means there's a live data link between the solemn verdict and our array system right now. A door they left open to keep our eyes shut. Akanqua got there before the rest of us. I watched it land on her face. You're saying we can go back up the link, she said. I'm saying, Ruz said, they shut our eyes by reaching into our system, and they didn't close the door behind them. I'm not going to pretend I understood the technical part. I'm a NITOPS watch officer, not a network engineer, but I understood enough. When the Concord overrode our arrays, they'd opened a connection from their warship into our station. To keep that override running, that connection had to stay live. A pipe, a channel, a door. And a door that opens one way can sometimes be made to open the other. Ruz and a team of about 8 people, humans, 2 Vulsha, and one of the Tarn merchants who turned out to be a brilliant systems engineer hiding in a cargo hauler's body. They descended on the array control room like it owed them money. I went with them because Akanqua wanted eyes on it, and I was the watch officer for that section. What I saw in that room over the next 2 hours was the human variable in its purest form. They didn't have the right tools, they improvised. They didn't have the right access codes. They brute-forced workarounds nobody should have been able to find. The Tarn engineer, her name was Vusk, kept saying, in this flat, dry voice, this should not be possible, and Ruz kept saying, cool, keep going, and they kept doing the impossible thing. At one point Vusk stopped and looked at Ruz and said, on my world, when an engineer faces a problem with no solution, they accept it. It is considered wisdom. Ruz didn't even look up. On my world, he said, when an engineer faces a problem with no solution, they get angry and break it open. It's considered Tuesday. Vusk stared at him for a long second. Then she made a sound I'd never heard a Tarn make. A short, sharp clicking I later learned was laughter. Show me, she said, show me Tuesday. And they did it. They went up the link. What they found on the other end wasn't a weapon. It was better. It was the solemn verdict's targeting system. See, to fire its sterilization beam, the planet-glassing weapon, the warship had to feed it precise coordinates. And those coordinates came from a targeting computer. And that targeting computer, in order to lock onto Tulla Gate, was using our own array data to map the station. Ruz had been right. The door swung both ways. They were using our eyes to aim at us. Which meant we were inside their aim. Now I want to be clear, we couldn't hack their ship. Their security was 1,000 years ahead of ours. Vusk made that very plain. We cannot break in, she said. Their walls are perfect. We don't need to break in, Ruz said. He was staring at the screen with that grin again. We just need to lie to them. Here's what they figured out. We couldn't control the solemn verdict, but we were feeding it our array data. The targeting computer trusted that data completely. It had no reason not to. It had taken our eyes by force. Why would it imagine we'd found a way to whisper back? So we whispered. We fed it lies. Ruz and Vusk and the whole team spent the next 90 minutes building a false picture of Tulla Gate, a ghost station. They moved the apparent coordinates. They shifted the mass readings. They made the targeting computer believe the station was 3 kilometers to the left of where it actually was, and slowly drifting. When they fire, Ruz explained, wiping sweat off his face, they'll fire at where they think we are, which is empty space. And then, he tapped the screen, the recoil signature, the beam discharge, all of it gets logged in their own systems as a successful sterilization. As far as the solemn verdict will know, it killed us. And then, I asked. And then they leave, he said. They report the kill. The Concord crosses Tulla Gate off the list, and we're a ghost, a station full of dead people that's somehow still breathing. It was insane. It was held together with improvisation and spite, and a Tarn engineer learning what Tuesday meant. It almost worked. I say almost, and I need to stop here and tell you about the moment it nearly all came apart. Because the clean version of this story skips it, and the clean version is a lie. We had maybe 10 minutes before the solemn verdict would fire. The false station data was loaded. Everything was ready. And then a kid walked into the array room. Not a baby, a teenager. Human, maybe 15. Skinny. Scared out of his mind. He'd been hiding in a maintenance crawl space, and he'd heard us through the wall, and he came out because he was alone and terrified, and he wanted to be near other people. And in his hands, he was holding a portable comm unit. An ordinary one. The kind that automatically connects to the nearest network and starts broadcasting a location ping so rescuers can find you. A location ping. A real one, with the real coordinates of the station. Vosk saw it first. The signal, she said, in that flat voice that had gone suddenly very sharp. He is broadcasting our true position. If it reaches the solemn verdict's receivers, it will contradict our false data. The targeting computer will detect the discrepancy. It will recalibrate. It will find us. The kid didn't understand. How could he? He just stood there in the doorway, holding the one thing that was about to get 40,000 people killed, looking at a room full of adults who'd all gone dead silent and pale. He said, I just wanted to find someone. I've been alone since. Turn it off, Ray said very gently. Son, turn it off right now. The kid fumbled with it. His hands were shaking too hard. He dropped it. It hit the floor and skittered under a console, still broadcasting, the little ping 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 audible across the room like a countdown. And here's where I want you to remember what I told you about humans and the wall. About how we push past the place where other species stop. Vosk the Tarn, she froze, not from cowardice. Her biology hit the wall. The fear maxed her out and her body locked up. That's not a flaw. On her world it kept her ancestors alive. You freeze, the predator's eye slides past you. But there's no predator here. The predator is a number ticking down, and freezing doesn't save you from a number. I went under the console. I don't remember deciding to. I remember being on my feet, and then I remember being on the floor with my arm jammed into a gap too small for my arm, my shoulder screaming, my fingers scrabbling against the broadcasting unit that kept sliding just out of reach. Ping, ping, ping. Ray's was shouting something. Somebody was counting. The unit was right there. I could touch it with 2 fingers, but I couldn't grip it. And I remember thinking, very clearly, if I can't reach this in the next 10 seconds, everyone I love dies. And so I reached anyway, past the point where my shoulder said stop, past the wall. I felt something tear. I didn't care. My fingers closed on the unit. I ripped it out and crushed it against the floor with everything I had until the ping stopped. The room was silent, except for me breathing like I'd run a marathon. Vosk unfroze. She looked at me on the floor, holding a crushed comm unit in a bleeding hand, my arm at a wrong angle. That should not have been possible, she said quietly. The gap was too small. Yeah, I said. I was laughing a little, which is a weird thing to do when you've dislocated your own shoulder. We get that a lot. The solemn verdict fired 60 seconds later. We all watched it on the docking feed. That beautiful, terrible ship, lighting up along its whole length, channeling enough energy to turn a station to glass. And it fired into empty space. 3 kilometers to our left, exactly where we'd told it we were, the void lit up white-hot. A beam wide enough to swallow a city, burning through nothing, through the ghost, through the lie. For 1 second I was sure it wouldn't work. I was sure they'd see the empty space and know. But the targeting computer was certain. It had our eyes, it had our data, and the data said kill confirmed. The beam shut off. The weapon ports closed. And then the comm crackled one last time, the Koran voice, and for the first time it sounded almost human, almost gentle. Sterilization complete. Teller gate is cleansed. The threat is contained. A pause. May the lost find peace. The solemn verdict turned in the dark and burned away toward the rest of its fleet, carrying a report of our death back to a galaxy that wanted us dead. And on a station full of 40,000 living, breathing beings, somebody started laughing. Then somebody started crying. Then everybody did both at once. We'd done it. We'd died on paper so we could keep living in fact. I wish that was the end. I really do. A clever trick, a near miss, a happy ending where we fool the big bad galaxy and slip away into the dark. But it wasn't the end. It was barely the beginning. Because here's the thing about playing dead. It only buys you time. Sooner or later somebody checks the body. And the Conquered was very, very thorough. Okonkwo knew it. She didn't even let us finish celebrating. She climbed up onto a console, same as that woman on the cargo crate hours earlier, the gesture passing down through us like it was written in our blood, and she raised her voice over the laughing and the crying. Listen to me, she called. Listen, we are not safe. We bought hours, maybe days. We are a station of ghosts now, and ghosts don't get to make noise. No transmissions. No lights on the outer ring. We are dead, and we have to stay dead until we figure out how to be alive again on our own terms. The room sobered up fast. They think the human threat is contained, she went on. They're going to go back to their lives. And while they do, while the whole galaxy breathes a sigh of relief that the dangerous little humans are gone, we are going to do the one thing they could never do, the one thing they were too afraid to even try. She looked around at all of us, human and not, survivors of a sterilization that never touched us. We're going to prove them wrong about what we are. I asked her later, much later, what she meant by that. We were sitting in the dark of the powered-down outer ring, both of us exhausted, my shoulder strapped up, watching the stars we weren't allowed to light a single lamp against. They think we're a weapon, I said. Project Lazarus, the human variable, all of it. They've decided we're the most dangerous thing in the galaxy and we have to be destroyed. They have, Okonkwo agreed. So how do we prove them wrong? How do you convince a galaxy that's afraid of you that you're not what they think? She was quiet for a long time, long enough that I thought she wasn't going to answer. Then she said, you don't convince them with words. They've heard our words for 40 years. You don't convince them by hiding either, or by hitting back, or by being everything they're afraid of. That just proves them right. Then how? She nodded out at the dark, at the vast cold galaxy that had voted to kill us and thought it had. There are 9,000 children out there, she said, alive because of Lazarus, and there are 1 billion more on 100 worlds dying of things we could cure. The Conquered declared us a threat for saving lives we weren't supposed to save. She turned to look at me, and her eyes caught the starlight the same way Sella's had caught the emergency strips, hours and a lifetime ago. So we keep saving them. Louder. Bigger. We turn this dead station into the largest hospital the galaxy has ever seen. We make ourselves so undeniably, impossibly good that the galaxy has to choose between killing the thing that's saving its children, or admitting it was wrong about us. I stared at her. That's insane. They'll come back. They'll bring the whole fleet. Probably, she said, almost certainly. Then why? Because, Idris. And here she smiled, and it was the most terrifying and beautiful thing I'd ever seen on a human face. The galaxy united against humanity because they were afraid of what we might do with our strength. They never once imagined what we do with our kindness. And kindness, when you back it with everything a human being is capable of pushing through, kindness is the one weapon they never built a defense against. She stood up, in the dark, in the ghost station, surrounded by the people of a dozen species who'd chosen to die on paper rather than betray their friends. "Let them come back," she said. "Let them see what we built while they thought we were dead, and then let's see who's really afraid of who."